What would you do if you came home early on Thanksgiving and found your own mother crawling on the ground like a dog just to eat? Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how one mistake in marriage almost cost a billionaire the only person who ever loved him, his own mother. The gates of the Lekki. Phase 1 mansion swung open with a mechanical hum, and Darlington Okoro's black Lexus rolled through into the compound 3 days earlier than anyone expected. The November night wrapped around Lagos like warm velvet, thick with humidity and the distant hum of generators. His mansion stood pristine against the darkness, its white exterior glowing under carefully positioned garden lights, every window reflecting wealth and success. But something felt wrong. Dara cut the engine and sat motionless in the leather seat, his businessman's instinct prickling at the back of his neck. The house was too quiet. Thanksgiving night should have meant music spilling from the speakers, laughter echoing through the corridors, the rich aroma of roasted turkey drifting through open windows. Instead, silence pressed against the glass like a held breath. He had cut his New York investor meeting short, caught the first flight back to Lagos, driven straight from Murtala Muhammad Airport with his heart full of anticipation. He imagined his mother's face lighting up like sunrise when she saw him. He imagined Chioma's delighted surprise, her arms wrapping around his neck. He stepped out of the car, his Italian shoes crunching on the gravel driveway, and moved toward the front entrance. Then he heard it, a voice drifting from somewhere beyond the main house, female, sharp, mocking. And beneath it, another sound that turned his blood to ice water in his veins. A whimper, trembling, broken. His feet carried him almost against his will around the side of the mansion, past the generator house that powered his empire of comfort, past the perfectly manicured hedges, toward the service quarters at the back. The voice grew clearer with each step, cruel, entertained, enjoying itself. "Go on, Mama. Crawl for it. Crawl like a dog." The world stopped spinning. Dara turned the corner, and everything he thought he knew about his life shattered like glass against concrete. There, on the dirty tiles near the refuse bins where garbage bags waited for a morning collection, his mother knelt on hands and knees. Mama Ngozi, 70 years old. The woman who had carried him on her back through hurricanes of poverty. The woman whose bones were now as fragile as dried leaves, whose body shook with the effort of holding herself up on all fours. She was crawling towards scattered pieces of turkey and jollof rice thrown across the ground like scraps for a stray animal. Her wrapper, once tied with dignity around her waist, was soiled with dirt and grease. Her gray hair, always neatly braided, hung disheveled around her face. Her hands, those hands that had washed clothes for strangers, that had sold Gary in the market, that had held him when the world was cruel, those hands scraped against the filthy tiles reaching for food. Above her stood Chioma, his wife, the woman he had pledged his life to. She stood in designer loungewear, phone raised high, recording. Her lips curved in amusement, her eyes bright with something that looked horribly like pleasure. "Faster, Mama," Chioma said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Before the rats come and get it first." Mama Ngozi reached for a piece of turkey, her fingers trembling violently. Then she saw him, her son, standing there in the shadows like a ghost materializing from her prayers. The horror that flooded her face was worse than any pain he had ever witnessed. Shame, grief, devastation. "Dara!" she gasped, and her hand flew to her chest. The phone clattered from Chioma's hand onto the tiles. Mama Ngozi's body crumpled forward, her other hand clutching at her heart as she collapsed. Time became liquid. The world became a silent scream. And in that moment, standing in his own compound, in the mansion he had built as a monument to success, Darlington Okoro understood with perfect clarity that he had become a stranger to the truth of his own home, But to understand how a son became so blind, how love became cruelty behind closed doors, we must go back. Back to where it all began. Back to Aba, a Bia state, where poverty taught lessons that wealth would later erase. The sun had no mercy in Ariaria Market, Aba. It beat down on corrugated iron roofs until the air shimmered with heat, until sweat became a second skin, until every breath felt like inhaling fire. This was where Mama Ngozi had spent 20 years of her life turning nothing into something, turning desperation into hope, turning hunger into her son's future. She had never finished secondary school. Her husband had died when Dara was 7 years old, leaving behind debts that swallowed their small savings and a single room with a leaking roof that turned their floor into a shallow river during every rainy season. But Mama Ngozi had something the world couldn't take: hands that refused to quit and a heart that beat with one single purpose. Every morning before the sun rose, while darkness still clung to the streets of Aba, she prepared gari to sell. Her fingers moved in the dark, practiced and sure, soaking and fermenting cassava, frying it in the large pan until it was ready. Every afternoon, she walked to the big houses in the nicer neighborhoods, carrying other people's dirty clothes in basins balanced on her head, washing and ironing until her back screamed and her hands cracked and bled. Every evening she returned to their single room and made sure her son had books, a pressed uniform, and something neither of them could afford to lose: hope. There were nights she ate nothing so Dara could eat twice. Mornings, she walked barefoot on burning asphalt so his school shoes would last one more term. Rainy seasons when she stood under the leak catching water in buckets so his schoolwork wouldn't get ruined. She never complained, never wept where he could see. She simply whispered the same words over his head every night, like an incantation, like a prayer carved into the universe itself. You are the light of this family, my son. You must rise. You will rise. And Dara rose. He studied by candlelight when Nipa took the electricity. He won scholarship after scholarship. He left Aba for the University of Lagos with borrowed luggage and his mother's blessings sewn into the lining of his shirts. He graduated top of his class in computer science. He built a fintech startup that exploded across West Africa like wildfire, solving problems for millions, making money move faster than dreams. By 32, he was a billionaire. By 34, his face smiled from magazine covers with headlines that called him the new face of African tech. Forbes profiled him. CNN interviewed him. The boy who once shared a leaking single room with his mother now owned a mansion in Lekki Phase 1 with 12 rooms and a swimming pool that glittered under the Lagos sun. But Darlington Okoro never forgot who had carried him there on her back. The first thing he did when real money came was move his mother from Aba to Lagos. He bought her a comfortable 3-bedroom flat in a quiet estate 20 minutes from his home, furnished it with everything soft and beautiful: plush sofas, a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds, air conditioning that made the Lagos heat irrelevant. He hired a cook and a cleaner. He visited every Sunday without fail. Every holiday, she was with him. She was his foundation, his compass, his queen, until Chioma entered the picture and changed everything. Before we continue with what happened next, pause for just a second. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss powerful stories like this one. Now, back to how Chioma came into Dara's life. They met at a charity gala in Victoria Island on a warm Friday evening. She stood near the champagne fountain in a gold dress that caught every light in the ballroom and reflected it back like she was made of sunlight itself. Beauty and confidence radiated from her like heat from asphalt at noon. She was an influencer with 500,000 followers, a content creator whose smile sold luxury skincare and designer handbags to women across Nigeria and beyond. When she laughed, the entire room turned to look. Darius had learned to be cautious. Money had taught him that lesson quickly. He had learned to recognize women who loved his bank account more than his soul, who saw him as a means to an end rather than a human being with a heart. But Chioma seemed different from the start. She asked about his mother on their first date. She said, "Family first," with such conviction that it felt like truth. On their third dinner together, she insisted on meeting Mama Ngozi. The meeting went smoothly. Chioma called her Mama with apparent respect, complimented the pepper soup, admired the old photographs of young Dare with his gap-toothed smile. Mama Ngozi smiled and laughed and played the gracious host. But when Chioma left and mother and son were alone, something shifted in the air. "She is very beautiful, my son," Mama said slowly, choosing her words with care. "But beauty is common in this world. Character is rare. Watch her closely. Watch how she treats those who can do nothing for her." Dare kissed his mother's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her, shea butter, and history. "I will, Mama. I promise." But love, as it so often does, made him blind. The red flags appeared like small cracks in a wall, barely visible at first. A wrinkled nose when Mama cooked bitter leaf soup. "The smell is too strong for me. Can't she make something else?" A deep sigh when Mama prayed aloud in Igbo, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of a language older than concrete. "Does she have to do that so loudly?" An irritated comment when Dara sent money to his cousins struggling in Aba. "You're not their father. Why do you keep carrying everyone's burden?" Each time, Dara explained, defended, smoothed the sharp edges. "She's adjusting, Mama. She grew up differently, in comfort. Give her time to understand our ways." Mama Ngozi said nothing more. But her prayers grew longer, more fervent, whispered in the dark. The wedding was extravagant. Victoria Island Reception Hall, 500 guests, influencers filming content from every angle, turning their union into viral moments and trending hashtags. Chioma's parents came from Enugu, prosperous and proud, carrying themselves with the confidence of old money and education. Mama Ngozi sat quietly in her corner table, dressed in simple cream lace, watching her son dance with his bride under lights that cost more than she had earned in 10 years. She clapped when others clapped. She smiled when others smiled. But her heart whispered warnings her son could no longer hear through the music. 6 months after the wedding, Dari suggested his mother move into the mansion. The flat was comfortable, yes, but Mama was getting older with each passing week. Her knees ached when she climbed stairs. Her heart sometimes skipped beats that left her breathless and afraid. He wanted her close. He wanted to care for her the way she had cared for him when the world offered them nothing but hardship. Chioma's smile was absolutely perfect. "Of course, baby. She's family. Your mother is always welcome here." But the restrictions began immediately and quietly, like poison dissolving in water. Mama's room was assigned in the boys' quarters at the back of the compound, not in the main house with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. She was welcome to visit the living areas, Chioma explained sweetly, but shouldn't occupy the space too much. Guests might feel uncomfortable. The main kitchen with its modern appliances and granite countertops was for the hired cook. Mama could use the smaller, older kitchen outside near her quarters. Dara noticed none of this. He was always traveling. Always in meetings that stretched from morning until midnight, building new apps, closing deals with investors in London, New York, Johannesburg, trusting his wife to build a home while he built an empire. The humiliation started small, almost invisible. Mama's food was served last at dinner, often cold, the portions growing smaller each week. She was excluded from the dining table when Chioma's influencer friends visited, expected to eat alone in her room like a servant. Errands fell to her. Fetch this package from the gate, carry these bags from the car, sweep the back corridor. despite her weak knees and the pain that made her gasp when she bent down. The house staff saw everything. The cook watched with troubled eyes as Mama was handed cold leftovers. The maid witnessed Chioma snapping at the old woman for praying too loudly. But fear kept their mouths sealed shut. Jobs in Lagos were precious, and Chioma had made it abundantly clear what would happen to anyone who carried tales to her husband. Chioma's cruelty grew bolder with each of Dari's absences, like a plant that thrives in darkness. November arrived wrapped in humidity and holiday anticipation. Thanksgiving was approaching, not a traditional Nigerian holiday, but one Dare had adopted from his American business partners, a day to gather and give thanks for blessings. He had a critical investor meeting in New York. 3 days at most, maybe 4 if negotiations stretched. He kissed his mother's papery cheek before his driver loaded his luggage. "Take care of her," he told Chioma, his hand gentle on his wife's shoulder. "She's been tired lately. Make sure she eats well. Don't worry. Baby?" Chioma's smile was pure sugar, sweet enough to rot teeth. "I'll take very good care of Mama." The smile she gave Mama Ngozi after the car pulled away was pure poison. The first day, Chioma locked the main refrigerator with a padlock, pocketing the key. "You eat too much," she told Mama flatly, her voice stripped of all pretense. "You're not in your Abba village anymore, eating everything in sight." The second day, she ordered Mama to kneel on the living room floor and clean it with a rag, not a mop. "On your knees, Mama, like you used to do back in Abba when you were washing clothes for people. Or have you forgotten where you came from?" The maid took a step forward to help, but Chioma's glare froze her in place. "Touch that rag and pack your things immediately." Mama Ngozi's knees screamed with pain, bone grinding against marble, but she obeyed. She prayed silently in Igbo while she scrubbed, her lips moving with words only God could hear. She asked him to soften this woman's heart. She asked forgiveness for whatever sin had brought this suffering into her old age. The third day was Thanksgiving night. Chioma roasted a turkey in the main kitchen. The aroma filled every corner of the mansion, rich, savory, making mouths water and stomachs growl. Mama Ngozi sat alone in her room at the back, having eaten only gari soaked in water since morning. The smell tortured her, reminded her body of hungers, both old and new. Finally, she gathered her courage and knocked gently on the kitchen door, her knuckles barely making a sound. "Chioma, please. May I have a small plate? Just small." Chioma turned from the counter, her eyes cold and flat as river stones. Without a word, she picked up the plate she had been preparing, piled high with turkey, jollof rice golden with spices, fried plantain glistening with oil, and walked straight past Mama toward the back door. She opened it and dumped the entire contents onto the dirty tiles outside, near where the garbage bags waited for collection. Food scattered across ground stained with old grease and dust. "There's your plate, Mama." Mama Ngozi stared, her mind unable to process what her eyes were seeing. "Chioma, please. You want to eat?" Chioma pulled out her iPhone, swiping to the camera with practiced ease. Her thumb hit record, then crawl for it. "Like a dog. Like the beggar you were before my husband gave you everything." Tears slid down Mama Ngozi's weathered face, carving paths through skin that had known 70 years of sun and sorrow. Hunger and humiliation warred inside her chest, both pressing against her ribs until she couldn't breathe. She thought of her son, of the sacrifices she had made, selling her dignity piece by piece in Ariari Market so he could rise. Of how this woman now held whatever remained of that dignity in her cruel, manicured hands. She thought of refusing, of walking away, of maintaining the last shreds of her self-respect. But hunger is a beast that devours pride. Slowly, every movement and agony, she lowered herself to her knees on the dirty tiles, then to her hands, and began to crawl toward the scattered food, her body moving like something broken. Chioma laughed, the sound bright and sharp as breaking glass. "That's it, Mama, good dog. Maybe I'll give you water in a bowl next time." The phone recorded every second, every humiliation. Every scrape of Mama's hands against the ground. And then that's when Darlington Okoro came home early and saw everything. The crawl, the laughter, the cruelty, and his entire world collapsed inward like a dying star. The hospital lights were too bright, too white, too clinical. They hurt Dara's eyes, but not nearly as much as the sight of his mother lying small and fragile in the bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, IV drip in her thin arm, monitors beeping around her like mechanical prayers that felt hollow. Dr. Okafor pulled him aside in the corridor, his expression grave. "Her heart cannot take this kind of stress again, Mr. Okoro. Whatever happened tonight nearly killed her. Another incident like this. I cannot promise you she would survive." Dara sat by her bed as dawn broke over Lagos, holding her hand, that hand that had carried the world for him, and wept. Not the silent tears of a controlled businessman, the broken, gasping sobs of a child who had failed the one person who never failed him. Mama stirred, her eyes open, clouded with pain and medication. "My son." "I'm sorry, Mama." His voice cracked and splintered. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have known. I should have protected you." She squeezed his hand with what little strength remained in her body. "You loved her, my son. Love makes us blind sometimes. It is not your fault. I chose wrong, Mama. I brought her into our lives." "No." Her voice was firm despite its frailness, the steel that had carried her through decades of poverty still there beneath the weakness. "You chose hope. That is never wrong. But now you must choose wisdom." He pressed his forehead to her hand and made a vow in the silence of his heart. This would never, ever happen again. He returned to the mansion at dawn, his eyes red, his soul scraped raw. Chioma was pacing in the living room, panic replacing cruelty now that consequences loomed. "Dara, please, I can explain. It wasn't what it looked like." He walked past her without a single word, straight to his office, his footsteps echoing on marble. The CCTV system stored 2 weeks of footage. He sat down and watched it all, every camera angle, every moment of his absence. Mama kneeling to scrub floors while her knees trembled. Mama eating alone in the dark like a forgotten thing. Mama being handed a plate only to watch it snatched away. The locked refrigerator, the mocking laughter that echoed through hallways. The crawl, captured from another angle that somehow made it even worse. He watched until his soul felt carved hollow, until there was nothing left inside him but clarity. When he emerged hours later, the cook and the maid stood in the hallway, terrified of being blamed. He spoke gently, his voice soft. "Tell me everything. No one will punish you. I need to know the truth." They told him. Every detail. Weeks of cruelty stretching back to the day Mama moved in. Months of cold isolation and deliberate humiliation. How they had wanted to call him but feared losing their jobs, feared Chioma's threats. How they had been feeding Mama scraps in secret just to keep her from starving in a house full of food. He thanked them with genuine gratitude. He paid them bonuses from his personal account. He asked them to stay and promised things would change. Then he made 2 phone calls, one to his lawyer to begin divorce proceedings, one to Chioma's parents in Enugu. Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo arrived the next afternoon, their faces tight with confusion and growing dread. They were good people, educated and prosperous, who had raised their daughter with love and discipline, or so they believed. When Dara showed them the footage on his laptop, Mrs. Okonkwo covered her mouth with both hands and wept like her heart was breaking. Mr. Okonkwo's face turned to stone, his jaw clenched so tight muscles jumped. "This is not the daughter we raised," he said, his voice shaking with shame and rage. "This is not how we taught her to treat elders, to treat anyone." Chioma fell at her father's feet, then at Dara's, tears streaming down her face. "Please. I was jealous. I was stupid and insecure. I'll change. I swear on everything. Just give me another chance." Dara looked down at her. This woman he had loved. This woman he had trusted with his most precious treasure. He felt no anger burning in his chest. No hatred. Just a vast, aching distance. A chasm that could never be bridged. "I forgive you, Chioma," he said quietly, meaning every word. "For my own peace, for my own soul, I forgive you. But I will never risk my mother's life again. Never." Her parents took her home to Enugu that same night, their car disappearing into Lagos traffic, carrying their shame with them. The divorce was handled privately, efficiently, without social media storms or blog headlines screaming for blood. Dara paid what was legally fair, asked for nothing but silence. Chioma's family, drowning in shame, agreed without negotiation. He sold the Lekki mansion 2 months later. The new house was smaller, simpler, more honest. A quiet street in Ikeja where bougainvillea climbed the walls and children played football in the evenings. 3 bedrooms, a garden with mango trees. No boys' quarters, no separation between family and staff, no hierarchy of worth. Mama's room was next to his, with a soft bed that cradled her aching bones, windows that let in morning light without harshness, and a door that was always open. They healed slowly, together, like broken things being carefully mended. Some evenings they cooked side by side in the kitchen, his clumsy hands learning her recipes passed down through generations, burning the stew, oversalting the rice, making her laugh. Some afternoons, he drove her to the clinic for checkups, holding her elbow as they walked, matching his pace to her slower steps. Some nights, they sat on the front porch, counting stars barely visible through Lagos's light pollution, the city noise distant and somehow comforting. "Are you happy, Mama?" he asked one evening as crickets sang around them. She smiled, her face peaceful in the dim light. "I am with you, my son. That is enough. That has always been enough." One Sunday after church service in a small parish that smelled of old wood and candle wax, a woman approached them. Her name was Ifeoma. She was a teacher at a primary school, quiet and kind, with a laugh like gentle rainfall on a tin roof. She greeted Mama first, not Derry, not the rich man, but the elderly woman, with genuine warmth and respect. Mama's eyes sparkled with something that looked like hope. Over the following weeks, Ifeoma visited their home. She brought fresh fruit from the market. She asked Mama about Abba, about her life, about her recipes, and the stories embedded in them. She listened with full attention. She honored. She saw. Dare watched carefully this time, his eyes open, his heart guarded but willing. And when Mama whispered, "This one is different, my son. This one has character," he allowed himself to believe in the possibility of love that didn't demand cruelty as its price. Months passed, like water flowing steady. Mama's health improved week by week. Color returned to her cheeks. Laughter returned to their small house. Light returned to spaces that had been dark. One evening, as they shared a simple meal of jollof rice and fried chicken at their modest dining table, Mama reached across and took her son's hand in both of hers, holding it like something precious. "You built a mansion once," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had survived together. "But you cannot build another mother." Dare nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I know, Mama. I know that now. And you cannot buy back time lost. But you can choose what comes next. You can choose wisdom over wealth, love over luxury. I choose you, Mama. Always, every time." She smiled, her face radiant with peace. "Then you have chosen well, my son." The city of Lagos hummed beyond their windows. Generators, traffic, a million voices overlapping. Life moved forward, imperfect and beautiful and real. And in that small house in Ikeja, a son and his mother built something no money in the world could buy: peace, forgiveness, and the kind of love that survives crawling through dirt. Now we ask you, wherever you are watching from, if you were Darie, could you forgive Chioma? Would you give her a second chance? Or would you always choose your mother's safety first? Drop yes in the comments if you'd forgive her, no if you'd walk away forever. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the soul and remind us what really matters. Because in the end, the greatest mansion you can build is not made of marble and glass. It's made of honor, dignity, and the sacred bond between a mother who sacrificed everything and a son who finally remembered. This is the story of Darlington Okoro, the man who built an empire but almost lost his soul. The man who learned that you can have all the wealth in the world, but without honor, you have nothing. And sometimes coming home is not about arriving at a place. It's about remembering who you are and who carried you there.